Divorce lawyers of Reddit. What is the most insane, evil, funny, dumb way a spouse has tried to screw the other? Had a client whose wife wanted him out of the house. I told him not to leave, just move to a different bedroom for the time being, because once he was out the chances of him ever getting back in were slim. He texted his wife and told her he was staying in the house. She called back and left a VM that she wanted him out, and if he wasn't out soon, she would start taking out her unhappiness on the children and would remind the children that mommy was being mean to them because daddy wouldn't leave. 101 on how to lose custody. I work for a divorce attorney now, but the craziest thing came to my attention when I worked for the prosecuting attorney. This couple was breaking up and Mr. left the house. Miss Us went to work the next morning as usual. When she returned home in the evening, she found Mr. had been to the house and removed his clothing and belongings as she expected. What she didn't expect was that he had also gorilla glued her belongings together. He glued the TV remote to the table, the phone to its cradle, the couch pillows to the couch, and even glued the vacuum cleaner to the carpet. She called the police and reported this as property damage. The police went with her through the house documenting dozens of items glued to various things, but for days she was discovering random things and she would call to amend or update her report. My GD oven mitts were glued to the wall, or he glued the effing sheets together in the linen closet. I've seen people do and say really awful things to each other, but that was diabolical. Wow. That's creative. Smart of her to call the police though. Documenting this upfront helps. This one hits close to home because it happened between my parents. We had a family friend who was a lawyer and my parents agreed that he would be the lawyer for both of them as a mediator. So, as the eats were being divided, my dad got absolutely slammed. She was going to get the house, cars, half his retirement, and an insane amount of alimony, to the tune of like $2,500 a month for the rest of her life. My dad has a good job as a municipal employee, but that was probably 70% ish of his paycheck. Turns out that my mom and the family friend actually conspired to rip my dad off and make it seem like that's what a divorce settlement looks like, and she was going to kick back more money under the table after the dust had settled. Dad just didn't know how these things worked. So, after some convincing, he finally went out and got his own lawyer. He got a very fair divorce settlement after that. Mom still to this day can't understand why we don't talk to her much. That other attorney could be disbarred for that. How about a wholesome, insane one? I know, but this was told to me by my mom regarding the divorce she got from my dad. They couldn't settle on an alimony amount. Mom and her lawyer came in with a number, dad countered with a number. They couldn't agree because my dad thought my mom should get twice the amount in alimony she was asking for, and my mom didn't want my dad to give her that much money for months. It took months for them to settle on a figure that appeased both of them. Even then, my mom puts aside the extra above what she wanted in case my dad ever has a financial emergency, and my dad puts aside the extra she didn't want in case my mom ever has a financial emergency. The funny thing is, they don't know the other is putting the money aside for the other. My mom told me about her emergency stash, and my dad told my brother about his emergency stash. Bro and I discussed it while talking about what nut jobs our parents are. Edit. I've gotten a lot of support for this response. Thank you. I'm not going to say that their divorce was perfect. It wasn't. There were still some hurt feelings and resentment from all parties involved. However, my parents, for all their flaws, both accepted their own responsibilities for the falling apart. I think it helps that they still loved each other deeply. They just weren't in love anymore. They have been friends since my mom was 2 and my dad was 3. Started dating when mom was 12 and dad was 13. They separated at the ages of 49 and 50. It makes sense that they grew apart. I've had a few people ask why they divorced in the first place. My dad had had a girlfriend for at least 15 years, possibly longer. My mom knew, but they agreed to not divorce until my younger brother had graduated high school. My dad got remarried to his girlfriend. My mom has also since remarried. All 4 of them get along famously now. The separation and divorce happened about 10 years ago. I'm very lucky to have 4 parents who care about me and who absolutely adore my own little dudes. Okay, I'm leaving this thread while the warmth from this post is making me feel better after reading about all the crazy people. Worked at an airport. Big burly guy brings an uglier dog in a crate to the counter. He is clearly misty-eyed. Turns out wife got the dog in the divorce and he has to send it to her, and she told him as soon as she gets it, she is putting it down. He asks if he can have some time with the dog before the flight, so they go out in the Grab and they both roll around in the Grab, dog's tail just wagging away, not knowing anything about his future. The guy puts him back in the crate, drops him off the counter, says thanks, and then just walked out head down and just looking crushed. That was 30 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. Who the duck does that? Exclamation mark. Divorce lawyer here. Spouse had been out of the house for weeks. She waited until he was on a business trip, came into the house, turned on all of the faucets, plugged the drains, turned off the furnace, and left. It was -10 degrees. He came back 5 days later. The house was ruined. The water froze and cracked the foundation. I'm guessing no insurance. Or insurance didn't cover a deliberate act of damage or something. Divorce lawyer. Accusing their former spouse of forcing them into prostitution. Text messages revealed they were actually just swingers. She also admitted to lying in order to make him burn. I can't wait to leave my practice area. Edit. I just wanted to clarify some points and answer some questions. Please excuse any of my clerical errors as I'm writing on my phone. First, this is not the most evil thing I have seen so far in practice. It's just one of the things that sticks out in recent memory. Second, in my experience, women don't have an unfair advantage or get away with things more than men. The reason this individual was not held in contempt was because judges have an incredible amount of discretion and they tend to exercise their discretion sparingly, unless someone is making a fuss in the media or publicly lying. In order to ruin someone's life, the court avoids exercising their discretion to punish individuals in a divorce context. The reason courts are hesitant to impose penalties or hold someone in contempt is because the majority of lying that happens, in my experience, comes from victims who shield their abusers. Lots of men, women, and children say things and then recant their testimony in order to stay in abusive relationships or save themselves and their families from threats of violence or retaliation. Victims need to feel safe to tell the truth. Having penalties gives the court a stick, and having discretion gives the court a carrot. Ultimately, we all want the truth, and holding someone in contempt, or threatening to hold someone on contempt, is one mechanism that helps us uncover the truth. Finally, women, men, judges, commissioners, and lawyers are all human beings. I've met humans who act like monsters and I've met angels dressed as humans. My sincerest hope is that we treat others the way we would want to be treated, and remember that we all make mistakes. Yes, I charge for my services and my duty is to serve my client to the best of my ability. Some clients just want it all to end, while others want to fight over the keychain they bought at Walmart 5 years ago. If that keychain means a lot to my client, I explain how much that keychain will actually cost them in the end and let them decide if it's worth it. I have met attorneys who drag out litigation to run up fees. However, any attorney worth their salt is consulting with their client and actively trying to bring about a speedy, fair resolution. That seems like a super illegal accusation. TL. Doctor, my client's spouse accused him of giving his deceased wife cancer. I represented a guy who was on his second marriage. His first wife passed away from cancer. He and his kids were obviously devastated. My client was a pretty sensitive guy with a big heart. His second wife could be very charming, which was why he fell for her, but it was all a facade. Anyway, to make a long story about a lengthy divorce short, my client met a very kind and affectionate woman during his case. They really hit it off and were basically engaged, even though his divorce was far from over. The fiancé started having health problems and was diagnosed with a form of terminal cancer. Somehow the second wife found out about this and tried to use the cancer diagnosis against my client in court. She developed this crazy theory that my client had killed his first wife by giving her cancer and that he was doing the same thing to his fiancée. The second wife's attorney, who was quite good, refused to be a party to it. The attorney never addressed the argument in court and didn't even ask the second wife any questions about it during testimony. Rather, the attorney informed the judge that the second wife wished to address the court directly about an issue. The judge allowed her to do so in a highly irregular move. The second wife told her crazy conspiracy theory to the judge, adding that she was certain my client had tried to give her cancer at some point as well. I wish I had an artist's rendering of the scene, capturing the second wife's crazy eyes, her attorney's look of shame/embarrassment, the judge's look of confusion/ennui, and my look of awe-inspired disgust. Poor guy though, having two loved ones get terminal cancer. Him going to school to be a vet assistant. My teacher is a veterinarian. She told us on Monday she's had clients bring their animals in to be euthanized so their spouse couldn't have them. SMDH. Is it even ducking legal? My uncle's ex tried to work it in that she would get half of whatever my grandmother would leave him when she pees. Jokes on her. My grandmother is palling over her kids. Not maliciously. My uncle is very well off and so is my mom, and leaving everything to my brother and me. Oh, also tried to get sole custody of both of their children, who are in their 20s. What would custody mean there? Like, you have to visit at least 5 times a year and be here for Christmas? Friend was going through divorce from insane husband. He had been texting her pics of the gun he bought and threatening her. Police were called. Nothing they could do because it was only a picture. He was staying with a secret girlfriend at this point. She allowed him to go get his stuff from the house. She was scared to go back in the house alone. I went with her. First red flag was he had changed the locks. So we waited for locksmith to open the house and change the locks again. Well, when the door opens, we noticed all of the furniture was gone. So we carefully went upstairs in search of her cats. The entire second floor was empty. No cats. No furniture. Even her clothes were gone. Come to find out he hired a moving company to pack and take everything, even the food in the fridge. Finally found the cats. He had taken them to another vet in town and put them up for boarding under his sister's name thinking she would not be able to find them. He was finally forced to disclose what happened to her possessions. He had them taken to a storage unit far away from the home. I can't believe him saying this, but relative to the amount of animal abuse in the rest of this thread, I'm glad he didn't try to kill the cats. Paralegal for divorce lawyer. This one is morbid. We represented a guy who believed vehemently that his wife was assaulting the children. The authorities were involved. Child services was involved. It was never clear what the truth was, or if anything at all was going on, but our client was sure. He shot his wife dead at a custody exchange in front of the children. He then sat down and waited for the authorities. We visited him in jail with his criminal defense attorney. As we were leaving, he told me, "Well, I guess the divorce is over now," and he laughed. This was the first time I had ever been speechless. Edit. This has gotten a lot of responses. I can't really reveal details or context here, but I can safely say that defending this action as heroic or understandable is an incorrect takeaway. There are no heroes here. The trauma this man put the children through is incredibly selfish, regardless of his intentions. There are so many other options that could have been explored, many of which were being explored when this happened. He abruptly put an end to all of them, making the truth forever impossible to discern. Edit 2. Where are they now? The children are in the custody of a family member. They are safe and well, although will no doubt need extensive therapy as they get older. Guy is in jail. I'm unsure of his final sentence. However, I doubt he will ever leave. Edit 3. What did the kids say? Forensic interviews are super confidential, and this case didn't have the chance to go to a hearing. However, after multiple interviews with both children and the parents, neither the police, child services, guardian ad litem, or child advocate recommended that the mother lose custody or visitation, nor did they require it to be supervised. All of these matters were ongoing when the mother died. I should have stopped reading this thread once I got to the parents who were saving alimony money for the other in case of emergency. I read one where in the settlement there was shared custody of a parrot. Neither were allowed to teach the parrot to swear at the other one. I hope the parrot is going through some counseling. I was an assistant for a family law practice, not a lawyer. So it was already a disaster of a divorce because the ex-husband was a rig. But it got so much worse when the wife started dating someone new with a severe cat allergy like a year after they split up. Her psycho ex bought a cat on his time with the kids, except has not allowed pets at his apartment. He sends the kids back to their mom's house with the cat and all its stuff. Mom is pissed because she didn't want a cat at all, plus her boyfriend is crazy allergic. She calls us asking what to do because her kids are bawling, saying that she can't get rid of their new sibling and she has the cat in the garage. Ex told kids, if mommy loves you, she'll let you keep the cat, since daddy is not allowed cats at his house. This is exactly the chiz my ex keeps saying to our 6-year-old. He undermines me constantly. It's exhausting trying to be civil with a ducking narcissist. Not my divorce, but my divorce lawyer told me about a case she was involved in where both clients were so petty that they had to all meet to argue over literally every single scrap of everything. The final object that neither would settle on was a ceramic rabbit statue, a really generic one from Home Depot or whatever. Zero sentimental value, but since it was the final item, neither side wanted to lose the last thing and they dragged it out over 3 separate meetings for this one thing. I don't remember which ended up getting it, but once they settled it and signed everything, the winning party stuck it on their lawyer's desk as a gift and walked out. They must have felt so cool yet looked so stupid. She accused her ex-husband of sexually molesting their children while under the watchful eye of the nationally endorsed social workers who oversaw his contact with them, which was only required because he didn't have his own private accommodation at the time. She also said that his Indian flatmates were inherently dirty. After the obviously false child molestation suggestion, I warned her of the consequences of being caught lying about that, i.e., permanent loss of custody. She fired me, but kept calling back using fake names to try and obtain free advice which contradicted my advice, but everyone she called immediately spotted her. This was a long time ago and now I specialize in insurance litigation, which is far less ugly. Do you know what happened afterwards? Did she lose custody? Not a divorce lawyer, but remember this from another Reddit. Husband and wife getting divorced. There was a clay car, Ferrari, Jaguar or something like that was worth a lot of money. It was a bone of contention in the divorce. After several months the husband finally proposes that he will let her have the car if she gives him the house. She agrees. Come to find out he had been taking the car out every day and doing loops around the city for hours, putting thousands of miles on it, making it worth nothing. Holy chiz. Divorces can really bring out the worst in people. I see a lot of unsubstantiated accusations of child abuse and or molestation to deteriorate the relationship between dad and the kids. And we'll hire experts and therapists and there will be an investigation. We'll have depositions and a trial. And after a year has passed without dad being allowed to see his children and thousands of dollars have been spent, it will come out that nothing happened. This happens in my practice about once or twice a year. Very common. The moment a parent is caught doing that, they should be jailed and or banned from guardianship. Sick ducks. Viralegal for a divorce lawyer here. Our client told us he didn't clear out the marital account after the parties filed, which technically is true because while he removed $45,000 he left about $3.50 in there. Disappointed that I didn't see any reference to the Loch Ness Monster yet. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my prior employer once was served with an obviously forged garnishment order from an employee's ex-wife, directing garnishment of his wages in an amount that far exceeded his actual wages. We reported it to the police department. Employer here who has had to garnish wages from time to time. I don't know how it is there, but here, when there's any sort of garnishment, we pay the money to a state/county, and they send the money to the person or company. The ex wouldn't have gotten it anyway. A soon-to-be ex-husband left his wife's prize koi to die on the doorstep of their house. Apparently the value of these fish, 6 in total, was over $100,000. She was, according to her lawyer, so distraught that she couldn't be in court. Only in LA. What the duck? Is this not destruction of livestock/property and animal abuse? Koi are really long-lived fish and can become a bit friendly too. Edit. I was quite rightly reminded that posting about an active file, even anonymously and on generic terms, is bad practice, so I removed that. I had one client who was controlling their spouse by keeping them addicted to meth. I fired them. My boss had a client who, well after we fired them, set themselves and their child on fire, rather than give up custody. A few people have asked if the above was a specific case. I'm ethically prohibited from confirming or denying, but this is sadly not a very unique event. There are lots of reported and unreported instances. None of these are that funny, I apologize. So here's my funny story. On the stand, my client and the other lawyer's client each spent about an hour saying I'm not lying, they're lying, then calling the other a bitch, a-hole, goof, you name it. Often, using that phrase exactly. At one point one of them was cautioned by the judge for swearing and said duck, sorry. The judge decided they were both not credible. Oh my lord, who the duck would set their child on fire? Was the kid okay? Question mark? Question mark? I worked at a computer repair store as a sales technician. Had a guy come in with a desktop that he wanted Windows reinstalled. I asked him if he wanted me to back up all of his data first, and he told me that he had everything he wanted and just did the wipe. I put it in the queue and he paid and left. I started it about an hour later, since an XP install was only about 45 minutes off the network. I didn't bother doing anything else except deleting the original partition and making a new one and installing Windows. About an hour after that his wife came running in asking if we had a computer with Smith as the last name. I told her I did, and she showed me her ID and said that her husband brought it in to try and destroy all the proof of him cheating and stealing money from their business. When she asked if I had wiped everything, yet I told her I just did a Windows install and didn't actually really wipe anything. I called her husband and told him the situation. I told him his wife was here to get the computer. He asked me if I reinstalled Windows like we spoke about, and I told him I had. He told me I don't give a chiz, give her the computer. There isn't anything left on it anyway. I said alright and hung up. I told her that he said I could give it to her and then explained to her how reinstalling Windows doesn't magically delete everything, and explained to her how I could recover all of her files in a couple of hours. I ended up staying late that night and she bought me pizza and Mountain Dew. I ended up recovering every file he tried to have me destroy and made multiple copies for her. She ended up calling him from the store and reading off some of the messages he had tried to delete from his emails. I was worried that he might try to come back in and confront me, but nothing else ever came of it. Very cute of her to bring you pizza and Mountain Dew. I didn't handle the divorce, I handled parts of the aftermath. In the divorce, she went AWOL, was living in a truck somewhere, and just couldn't handle it mentally. He gave her 5 of his 9 companies. They were the ones that owed 7 figures in payroll taxes. He had made her the bookkeeper on paper. She spent decades trying to shake the ice for the results. Is there a way to say, no, I don't want this, or is it just that she didn't know about the debt? Not my case, but during my first year of law school, lawyers from different practices came to give us a peek behind the curtain of different areas. The divorce lawyer told the story of Rotherwell, a couple that spent months and months and many tens of thousands of dollars fighting over absolutely everything, all the way down to a single ceramic ashtray. He couldn't remember the significance, but somehow it had come through the husband's family. Even after everything else had been decided, they spent many more months and nearly $100,000 fighting over just this ashtray. Then, after a court hearing, the wife finally won the ashtray. She promptly strode out to the white courthouse steps and smashed the ceramic ashtray, left the pieces all over for the husband to see on his way out. Decided that day I would not be a divorce lawyer. TL. Drive. Spent $100K to win an ashtray only to smash it in spite. I think you made a good decision after reading all these answers. Not a divorce lawyer, but my grandma Ducker, her divorce lawyer, before she served her husband the papers, got pregnant, and then convinced her husband it was his. He paid child support for 18 years and never had a clue. Pretty cheesy. The lawyer had a family of his own. They have no idea my mom and my family exist. 18 years, and on her 18th birthday he found out it wasn't his. Have a friend who went through a nasty divorce and his ex was vengeful as hell, despite him having done nothing wrong like cheating, lying, etc. Basically, he got laid off from good job and the loss of status embarrassed her, especially as he took to being stay-at-home dad and their kids adored him. Never mind she had MBA and six-figure job herself. She would buy expensive chiz on credit cards to show high expenses, then return it for cash or store credit, so that the refund didn't go back on card, so that she could try to get more support. To just get a job, he took one at Home Depot. He'd been an engineer at a tech company. Later on, he landed an IT consulting position that was part-time, but paid about what he made at HD working full-time. She petitioned the courts to try and force him to have a full-time job, basically wanting to force him to spend 30 more hours to earn same. Part of his custody granted him dinner one night/week with the kids, i.e. 5 to 7 p.m. He asked for it to be school pickup to 7 p.m. instead, and she refused that, even though from 3 to 5 they were at home with a nanny, who had to be paid for that time, while mom was at work. Part of his custody granted him dinner one night/week with the kids, i.e. 5 to 7 p.m. Isn't that really an unusually small amount of time? Why did he get such a bad deal? Once had a boss who had to leave his house for 6 hours, while his ex-wife grabbed all the belongings she was legally entitled to. When he returned home every knob and handle was gone. Doorknobs, cabinet handles, drawer handles, anything that was screwed onto something and used to open it, she had taken. Every day for the next week he would occasionally yell out she took the ducking knobs. My friend's mom did this when she found out her husband was cheating. In addition, all the light bulbs and toilet paper, even the light bulb in the fridge. She knew he would come home from work in the evening and have to figure out what was going on. Former divorce lawyer. Not so much insane, but unfortunately common, accusing former spouse of molesting the children in domestic violence to retain full custody and get a restraining order to force spouse out of the marital home. This sets the new status quo for custody, which judges are reluctant to disrupt considerably down the road. Takes months if not years for accused spouse to prove his innocence, and CPS will often find evidence where none exists if accusing party is a good enough manipulator/actor. Pretty horrendous long-term outcome for all parties. Kids are brainwashed against estranged parent when young. Later they often grow to resent the accusing parent for poisoning their relationship with estranged parent. Kids often grow up with multitude of mental health issues. Probably one of the worst things a person can do to their children. All to win against their former spouse. People who do this and are found out should be jailed. I don't care how long after the fact it is. This is just so absolutely ducked up. I'm not a divorce lawyer, but my parents got divorced about a year ago. My mum didn't want my dad to show up in court because he would contest and then they'd have to split the eats. She phoned me and told me to put laxatives in his food so he wouldn't be able to make it there. Did you? I'm a lawyer, but have had a very limited amount of experience in divorce cases. The first case I ever worked, the husband shaved/waxed every single hair off his body in an attempt to avoid a court-mandated drug test. Edit, a word. We had a guy at work do this. Shaved his whole body, razor burn on the back of his neck, cut up his elbows. He was a hairy dude. Then he failed the urine test. I asked him why he went to all that trouble, and he said, I don't know, I was high. Not a lawyer, just grew up with a chisty family situation. My mom was an evil mastermind with this divorce, let me tell you. So my parents had been separated, but living in the same house for a while, and it was around the time of year the family would normally go for a camping trip, Canada Day I believe. She convinced my dad that we would break the trip up, and he would get a week. Then when he returned she would get a week with us, the 3 kids. Secretly during my dad's week she got her friends to help clear the entire house out, and I literally mean clear it out. There was nothing left, not a single clothes hanger, no couches, TVs, quite literally nothing. She chose this vacation setup really well too. Camping meant we didn't need money or have access to cell service, which she took advantage of as well, and emptied the bank accounts and hid all the money away. She didn't stop there though. She also maximumed out lines of credit and all credit cards. Normally this would take a while, but she was smart as hell in this approach. Earlier when planning this divorce she had convinced my dad to quit his job, quite high paying I should add, to start a company. This company was still new and needed a ton of expenses paid, so the banks didn't think twice about this ridiculous amount of money being transferred as it wasn't out of the norm anyways from their new setup with the company. Then, when it came time for my dad's trip to end, she told him he needed to call her when he got back in Seoul range. Upon calling, she told him that she was on the way out in the same direction anyways, so we could just meet halfway to spare us kids a bit of driving time on our way to the next trip, which was odd considering after a week of camping we all wanted to shower and clean up, but she was very adamant. We met up and swapped vehicles, then my dad was on the way home alone while we were off to hide away at a location different than where she had told my dad. When he got home he thought we had been robbed. It didn't sink in. He called the cops and started phoning family. Because of how empty the house was he broke down and didn't know what to do. That's when my mom's dad came over and told him the truth. He said she left him and took everything. She hid us and I believe tried to steal us, but that part is a bit fuzzy for me. Eventually it somewhat caught up with my mom. The judge was shocked at what she did. She even went as far as trying to convince us kids that my dad was abusive and had us interrogated by a cop wanting us to lie about him. The whole situation was crazy. She ended up blowing all the money on fancy trips and shopping sprees with her friends, and when the judge ordered her to pay it back she fled the country. Now she lives in Australia and doesn't have to pay anything. I've got to ask, how is your dad now? My dad is a divorce attorney. His clients couldn't decide who would get the Labrador puppies from a new litter they just breed. The pups are worth $1,000 a pop. Well, they also hadn't been up to date on their payments. So dad brought a litter of 8 floppy puppies home as collateral for us to have until they could negotiate the settlement. So much fun for us kids. Client, I'm a little short on money right now. Maybe there's some other way I can pay you? *SLIDES puppy across desk and raises EYEBROWS*. Most malicious thing I know of personally involved a coworker of mine. He was sleeping with a married woman, and ultimately the husband found out she was having an affair. Really ugly divorce ensues, during which they fought over a lot of eats, but the real point of contention was their dog, lovely GSD named Orion. Eventually, husband gets custody of the dog, and in under a month, has the dog put down, just to hurt her back for the affair. Edit. When I posted this, I thought this situation was a rarity, and have shock and awe value from the cruelty at work. After reading the responses in this thread, not only am I saddened by how many pets get caught in the crossfire, but I'm genuinely shocked by the lengths some people will go for petty vengeance. There must be rules on vets putting down healthy pets. Not a lawyer, but my mom forged divorce papers to cheat on my dad. For 2 years I got my beat whenever I brought it up. Edit. While this is the most upvotes I've gotten so far, I'm not satisfied with it seeing as all these upvotes come from the idea that I'm being abused. Let me clear this up, I'm far from abused. I have a radio, TV, Xbox One, guitar, and iPhone 11 all in my room. I also have Asperger's, which my mom has done a great job of helping me *. It was a weak time for my family and we had slowly made progress to fix things since. Edit 2. Everyone saying I'm abused are just jackies. I know I'm not being abused or have been abused. If I thought it was abuse, the police know who I am and I would have already called them. This comment is getting deleted soon. Trying to get me to admit to going through abuse I didn't go through is just pissing me off, and I do not have to take this. I chuckled at the last sentence. Not out of malice, but I too have been in that situation where bringing something up is detrimental to your safety. Sorry bud. Not a lawyer. I worked at Staples for 6 months in college. I only ever sold one chair mat because the cheapest one was crap and the nice one was $120-ish. One day a guy walks in who looks homeless. He looks distraught. I give him my normal "doing alright today, sir?" and he tells me that he needs a chair mat, so I walk him back to show him the options. I told him that no one had ever bought one because the $30 mat is flimsy and the nice mat is over $100. He looks deeply into my eyes and says, "My wife left me today. She cheated on me and she's going to take everything. Give me the most expensive mat you have. If she wants it, I'll cut it down the middle so she can have her half. Ducking bitch. I didn't really know what to say, but I came back with, well, we do sell protection plans for $9.99. If anything happens to it, he interrupted with, duck it, add it on there. Every dollar spent is one she can't have. I hope he's alright. I probably caught him on the worst day of his life. Got props from the bosses for not only selling a mat, but also for the protection plan. I'm half cringing at the boss's reaction and half wondering what would have happened if you'd shown the customer your entire store catalog. Husband and wife divorce after husband finds out wife is sexting other guys. He goes into a deep depression. They didn't have much. Lots of debt and 2 dogs. One was a dog he had had since before the marriage. He got her. The other dog was only about 3 years old and was bought to keep the older, 7-year-old dog company while they worked. Wife demanded that, since he got his dog, that she got the other. He is depressed and just wants to move on, so he agrees. She gets the dog and has it put down the next day. She didn't want the dog. She just wanted to hurt him. How chesty of a person do you have to be to involve something as innocent as a dog in your petty fight that you yourself are responsible for? How do you justify something like that? I'm mad at him for finding out I cheated on him. I don't practice divorce law, but I did an internship with a family law judge in law school that involved me sitting in on a lot of stuff. One divorced couple came in because the ex-husband wanted to lower his spousal support payments due to his lowered income, great financial responsibilities, and the fact that his ex-wife was declining to seek paid employment, all of which sounds reasonable on the face. It turned out that, while his income had been lowered due to cuts, his new wife, who technically worked as his assistant and had done so prior to the divorce, was now making quadruple her salary, more than he ever had. He claimed that his ex-wife had unpaid renters living with her and could have money to survive if she charged them rent. It turned out they were the couple's shared 18-year-old twins who were living at home, having just graduating high school, and were going to keep living at home while starting college in the fall. It also later turned out that he allowed his stepdaughter and her 2 children to live with him, and his wife rent-free *A and D* paid for her college. His ex-wife produced evidence that he told his own kids to figure out paying for college themselves. He claimed that his ex-wife worked as a nanny for free by choice and should be getting paid for work elsewhere. The kids she watched for free were their 3 joint grandchildren from their eldest child, 2 of which were severely disabled. He claimed that when he married his new wife he gained over 15 new dependents, which was technically true, but those dependents were all in Mexico and included his new wife's grown siblings and their families, none of whom he had ever met. This dude was shocked when spousal support wasn't decreased. Hes trying to bleed his ex-wife dry, not realizing Hes being bled dry by the new one, lol. Not a lawyer, but my partner has a mate who was going through a messy divorce. He registered as a gambling addict and went to some Gambling Anonymous, or whatever it's called, and proceeded to go to the casino every day, taking wads of cash with him, pretending to gamble it all away, while he was secretly squirreling it all away. That way, when it came to the divorce, and he was questioned where all his money went, he could prove that he lost it all through his gambling addiction, and never had to pay her a penny. Did he manage to then hide the fact that he had enormous wads of cash he shouldn't have, for, presumably, years afterwards? Or did he do something like open up a car wash or laundromat and claim all the money came from there? Although he'd then have to pay taxes on it, but still. Close bracket. Again, not a divorce lawyer, but 30 years ago a friend of mine was going through a messy divorce. His wife had cheated on him and was trying to take him for everything, really spiteful when she didn't get something. The court had instructed her to turn over the car to him. She waited until the last day on the order and then returned it with serious body engine damage. It was pretty clear she'd run it into a wall or tree out of spite right before doing it. But since she just left it parked on the street by his apartment and dropped the keys in his mailbox, there was no way to prove it. I came up with a solution: get it stolen. As a favor to him, I drove the car up to Harlem while he followed in his other car. parked it in front of some gang members, waved to them, blatantly tossed the keys on the driver's seat through the open window, and then got in his other car with him and we left. We went around the block, waited 10 minutes, went back and the car was gone. Car was never seen again. He reported it as stolen and collected the insurance. Nice job waiting out the statute of limitations there. Deleted. Legally, could he be entitled to one silicone boob implant? Read about 5 answers by now, and I want to point out that an insane amount of them lead to animal cruelty. What the duck is that about? Probably because it's the most effective way to hurt the other person without breaking the law, which means they should probably make it against the law. Edit. After reading a few more, and noticing it's often in retaliation for cheating. I'm hoping that maybe, just maybe, the ex just said they put the doggo down, but didn't and is secretly actually having a happy full life. I read about a case where the wife was trying to take half of a guy's business and millions in personal eats, only to find out that the business had been moved into his son's name years earlier, and the guy donated all their savings, millions of dollars, to a children's hospital in his soon-to-be ex-wife's name, so she couldn't get the money. The judge said what he did was technically legal, since it was community property and no freeze had been placed on it yet, but was morally unconscionable. Lawyer said in his entire life he never saw a bigger smile on a man's face. He just kept saying I just wanted to help the children and smiling. I was a live-in boyfriend to my ex-GF who had kids with her ex-husband. His new GF did not want him paying child support to her, so she had her parents pay for an attorney. They served my ex on her son's birthday seeking a change in the parenting plan and wanting full custody of the kids. That's when the lies started. They were children that enjoyed playing on the playground set in the back of our townhouse building. So yeah, they had typical bumps and bruises that kids get from playing. I was accused of physically abusing the kids. One kid was school age, so CPS showed up unexpectedly at their school to interview them, then came to our house to inspect our home environment and to interview me. CPS concluded there was zero evidence of any type of abuse at our home. It's unbelievable that people can get away with meritless accusations without any repercussions. It's a duct system where real victims suffer and children are used as pawns because grown adults can't act like the children they are supposed to protect, care and love. Personal experience. Unbeknownst to me, my ex was having an affair. I worked a lot of hours, so I didn't pick up on it. We had always dreamed of buying a house on a huge local lake to retire in. We literally started shopping for houses and even toured a dozen or so. We found 2 well within our budget, but would need to sell our house first. My wife convinced me to take out a couple loans in my name and get a couple credit cards, again in my name. Most of the bills were in hers, and the mortgage was in hers, so I did. I spent about $25k in CC and loans to fully update our house and get it ready for market. As soon as the work was done, she told me she was leaving me and wanted to sell the house. Damn, did she get the house, or is it still ongoing? Wow, today is my day. Another where to start? The person who hid $250,000 from a business sale, so it wouldn't be included in the equalization payment, while providing frank disclosure on the actual sale number. The person who made a fake prostitution ad for their ex as proof that they were not a good parent, without considering that I would want to know why they browsed prostitution ads during their parenting time. The ones who spent thousands of dollars working out the appropriate access, custody, and support terms for their dog. Hard to say. Unreasonable people keep my lights on. Edit. To add the one that bothered me the most. It wasn't my file, but I was in court that day for another matter. A local police officer had a family law conference. Coincidentally, a bunch of officers from his force and neighboring forces decided to attend family court that day and stand in the hall outside the one family law courtroom. A dozen officers, in full uniform, there to provide support to their brother, I guess. His ex had to walk through a gauntlet of uniformed officers to get to court. This one really bothered me, and still does. If I had been her lawyer, I would have raised a shitstorm for trying to intimidate my client, and potentially trying to intimidate me. At least they cared about the dog unlike the other people in this thread. Edited for spelling, as I was shaking while typing this out earlier today. My dad was physically and verbally abusive to my mom and my siblings. He never sexually abused us, but he was serially unfaithful to my mom and had a nasty drug habit. He left rehab so many times, I don't know why she stuck with him that long. When I was in 7th grade, he tried to kill my mom, and she finally files for divorce. And none of his outrageous claims are believed. But I was a knucklehead like my dad. Nobody could tell me right from wrong. I was just following the example I had, and it wasn't good. Mom told me to straighten up or go live with dad, and like a fool, I chose poorly. It was a year of pure hell. His philosophy was the beatings will continue until morale improves, and he took it literally. He also remarried another drug addict right away, I suspect to make my mom jealous, but it backfired. During that year, he beat me, his wife, and even put my stepbrother's face through a black coffee table when he tried to defend her from him. I decide I want to go back to live with mom, and it outraged my dad. He went off the rails for a bit. So he asks me one morning how I felt, and I told him to his face I wanted to live with mom, because he was an abusive a-hole. Bad idea, as I got beat. But mom calls me that night and asks why we weren't at the courthouse. Turns out he skipped the court date and said he couldn't take off work because he wanted to keep custody to make my mom miserable. This happened 2 or 3 more times. Finally I wizened up, and the next time he asked me, I told him I changed my mind and wanted to stay with him. So he says hop in the car. We get to the courthouse. My mom lived 2 hours away from his place because he moved right after he got engaged. So inside the courtroom the judge asks me which parent I want to live with, and I say my mom. He asked why I was changing my mind from a year ago, and I detailed all the abuse from the last year, including intentionally skipping court dates. After asking me how I was going to answer, judge glares at my dad and dismissed me from the courtroom, and I have to sit in the hallway on the bench alone. 10 minutes later my dad stomps out, grabs me by the arm, and drags me to the car saying the judge called me a liar and ruled in favor of my dad. But he lied and actually kidnapped me and beat my 2 hours back to his place. Oddly it wasn't ruled a kidnapping because the judge didn't sign the ruling yet, or else my mom never pressed charges on him, but he never went to jail. She came the next Friday night with a deputy to pick me up. His new wife, I refused to call her my stepmom, caught me packing a few belongings and told him, and he left work to try to beat me again and stop me before she could get into town. But I climbed out my bedroom window onto the roof and told him I would jump off and run away to the police station if he tried to stop me. Just as he was yelling at me, the deputy arrived and my mom was pulling up behind him, so crisis averted. I was a different teenager after that, not perfect, but more respectful. Ended up working at 15 to help pay bills while I finished high school. I hated my life as a teenager, but it made me into the man I'm now. Joined the service a month after high school and married 2 years later, promising I would break the chain of violence and abuse. We just celebrated 25 years in March and I've never stricken my wife or cheated on her. By God's grace it will be that way the rest of my life. Jesus. I worked in family courts when first starting out. The most memorable case I saw was the woman took literally everything out of the house. She ripped out the carpets even. This reminds me of a case that happened in my family around the time of World War I. My great-great-grandpa had been beating up his wife as well as pimping her out. In those days, divorce laws were heinously unfavorable to wives, and she was illiterate and an immigrant not confident in her language skills. So she didn't know how to start a legal process. But she decided she'd had enough. One day he came home from work and everything was gone. All 9 of their kids and all the furniture. Apparently she'd decided this was the easiest way to avoid a fight. Unfortunately, he found out where she'd gone and went over to her new apartment, ranting and screaming and smashing the furniture. He said something like, "I don't give a damn about you or your worthless furniture, but how dare you take my children?" She incredulously asked, "Are you serious? You really only care about the kids?" He said yes. So she said, "Fine, take the kids and go home then. I'm staying here." And he, having backed himself into a corner, couldn't say no. He ended up a single father with 9 kids and no furniture. My great grandma had to drop out of grade school to raise the younger kids. Incredibly, he actually tried to straighten out and be a good father after that, despite his abusive history. Meanwhile, great-great-grandma moved in with a new guy and went on with her life. She'd visit the kids when her ex was at work, but she didn't speak to him anymore. After a few decades of this, my grandpa, their grandson, graduated from law school. He went to his grandfather and said, "Listen, you haven't lived with her since 1920. You clearly don't care about her. The kids are grown up. If you stay married, she'll have rights of inheritance. Why don't you let me file official paperwork, get you properly divorced, and let her marry the new guy so he can take care of her?" Great-great-grandpa didn't argue with the logic. There was still no such thing as no-fault divorce, so he had to sue her on the grounds that she'd abandoned him. She, seeing the opportunity, confessed to the court that she absolutely had abandoned him and been unfaithful for many years, so she wouldn't contest. Me culpa wink. The divorce went through and they all lived happily ever after. I'm an interpreter who works frequently with police and lawyers. The most out there thing I ever interpreted in court went like this: "Miss So-and-so, we know each other for a long time, correct?" "Yes. As a matter of fact, we have known each other for 5 years, correct?" "Yes. And at the end of each and every meeting we had during the past 5 years, we always agreed on one thing, correct?" "Yes. Please, tell the judge what we agree on. It's not okay to break in my ex's apartment and lick all his cutlery. Yet, here we are, Miss So-and-so. I died." This made me giggle and is a welcome respite from all the dog killing and child molestation accusations. Thank you. Deleted. Happened to me a few years ago. Me and my wife split. I came home from work one day saying I took the kids to live with my mom. 36 hours later she had a court date in hand. Judge listened to her for maybe 30 seconds and told her she had to bring the children back, and she wasn't allowed back because she chose to leave in the first place. My lawyer was amazing too. I met her when filling out the paperwork, and she heard my story, moved some appointments around, and took me on as a client. Something similar happened to her when she was a kid. That's why she became a family lawyer. The other lawyer, when he saw her, just bowed his head in respect. Till, when you're about to go through a divorce, don't clean out the accounts and hide the money. Grab your pets and put them in a safe place where *nobody* will ever find them until the divorce is all long over. I tried to do this, but my STBX called the cops on me. I explained how abusive he was. Picture a sobbing, sleep-deprived woman covered in bruises and a broken leg in a cheap hotel lobby trying to explain to the cops that her husband tried to kill her the night before, but the cops told me that because I left and took the dogs with me without telling him, fled in the middle of the night, that I was in the wrong, and even if I wanted to argue out keep the dogs would have you stay with him until a judge decided. Cops took my dogs back to him. All happened within 4 hours of my leaving. I never saw my dogs again. I knew a guy that got out of the military at 19 years so his ex wouldn't get half his pension. He would rather get nothing than give half the pension to his ex if he stayed in one more year. I'll but work in the court system. One's case that came in was a couple divorcing on mutual terms. The husband had one child with her and the wife had a child from the previous marriage. He agreed to pay child support for both children. I guess he really cared about this other enough to support her, even though it isn't his obligation. Judge signs the order. They go to set up the child support account, and it gets kicked back saying you can't have 2 accounts for one child. Turns out she's been collecting child support from the biological father the entire time and never told him. She basically tried to milk 2 fathers for one child, and the other attorney knew about it. Here in Canada, a kid can legally have up to 2 individuals responsible for paying his or her child support. There was a court case a few years ago where a lady tried to change that law and have the number up to 5. Now, my dad went through some financial troubles. One day he decided he could have more money if he chose not to pay mortgages, property taxes, car notes, etc. Eventually he was arrested for tax evasion and my mom found out and immediately filed for divorce. My mom was a shopaholic and took no about as well as a toddler being told they can't have ice cream. She insisted my dad didn't make enough money and kept maximuming out her Amex weekly. Thus my dad's solution. During the divorce, she said she wanted the nice cars. Great, take them. Then she told my dad she wanted the house. My dad begged and pleaded with her not to take the house. Point blank told her that the house was days away from being foreclosed on. He told her that she couldn't afford to take that hit on her credit, but she really wanted to stick it to him, so she thought he was bluffing. After a week of mediation, he finally gave in and said, "Fine, take the house." The house and the mortgage were transferred into her name and the house was foreclosed on and a lien was placed on the house. Through some shady deal, she short sold the house without informing the new owner of the lien, failed to claim it on her taxes, and spent the money. When the new owner finds out, she is screwed. Not to mention, if the IRS ever comes to collect capital gains. All because she wanted to screw over my dad. Clarification/edit 1. I changed lien to lien. B. I'm fairly oblivious to how homeowning/mortgages work, i.e. I don't know how to spell lien. This is the story from how I understood it. My dad was arrested for tax evasion not defaulting on a loan. I cold bean clearer. The story is true. If there's anything that doesn't add up, it's my misunderstanding of how mortgages work. Hold up. When the new owner finds out, as in, this is happening right now. I'm in a different area of law, but my coworker had a client in a messy divorce, where the parties were required to split up some antique pots. When the husband delivered the wife's share of the pots to our office, he took a chiz in each one of them. It was a whole big incident. I'm intrigued. 1. Did he do all that pooping at once, or did he stay there for 6 hours and stuff his face with Taco Bell and poop whenever the urge struck? 2. Or did he take a huge dump in one pot, snap on a pair of disposable gloves, grab a poop knife, and divvy up the logs? 3. Or did he put all the pots in a row, strip off his pants, and then poop waddle down the line? 4. Or did he pay you $50 to make an aimless line of pots and shove them under his butt at a slow steady pace while he unleashed the kraken? 5. Was toilet paper used? Did he maybe stick a piece on top of every turd, or just toss all the two in the pot with the biggest load? I just saw this on a YouTube video. The husband gave the wife everything material, house, cars, etc. in the divorce except his Magic the Gathering collection. When he went to collect it, he found his wife had broken the seal on his MTG Alpha starter deck. This was worth about 20k USD at the time, and currently for sale on various sites for around 50k. For context, as soon as you break the seal the deck becomes worthless, and unless you get some of the insanely priced cards, like Black Lotus, you will lose a significant amount of money. So she literally got all the eats they accrued over the marriage, and killed the only thing of value this guy got out of total spite. Magic the Gathering collection. I know of a guy who had these really rare playing card decks that he managed to win in a divorce settlement, and his wife did the same thing. He ended up suing, and she had to pay over $250,000 because that would have been the insurance payout if they were stolen. Not a divorce lawyer, but about 15 years ago I handled 2 insurance claims for a man in his 40s or 50s who was getting divorced from his wife, who was in her mid-20s. First she filed a claim on his auto policy. He was wealthy, but had to have a high-risk auto policy due to many speeding tickets. She was not on his policy, saying that he crashed into her car on purpose. The claim was denied because there is no coverage for intentional acts. A couple of weeks later she files a claim on his homeowner's policy, saying that he stole her engagement ring, which was specifically insured at a high amount, like $10k plus. Again, she is not the policyholder, and the ring wasn't stolen, he just had possession of it, so there was no claim to be made. I wonder whatever happened with that guy. Sounds like it's not his first rodeo. A friend's ex-wife and he settled their divorce with her getting the house, a hefty chunk of retirement, all the gifted jewelry and his Harley she had gifted him for his birthday. A few weeks later, a robbery occurred, and the only thing that was stolen was the jewelry that he had gifted her, which was intended for their daughter. She tried to file an insurance claim on the jewelry, but forgot to get appraisals and add as riders, so the maximum insurance paid was $1. $500 for over $20,000 of jewelry. Suspicion is she staged it, but is now stuck with stolen jewelry she can't legally sell, nor wear, nor give to the daughter without tipping the dad off to the scam. My husband's male cousin is going through a nasty divorce at the moment. In the latest bout of crazy, before the lockdown, the nearly ex-wife accused him of raping her and had him arrested outside the school while he was picking up their son. The charges were dropped after he proved his whereabouts when the alleged rape took place, and her story kept changing. The divorce is still ongoing, and she's likely to lose custody. We're waiting for her to accuse him of abusing their son. Why do the proceedings just continue as usual when one party has already proven they'll light a torpedo the other party like that? Not my story, but one I read here a couple of years ago. I really hope I don't butcher it as it's been a while, but here goes. There was a super wealthy guy that was a top exec at a Fortune 500 company who was getting a divorce, and it was rather nasty. This guy was pretty much set for life. He had a bunch of stock, houses, and eats in so many places. The ex-wife wanted everything she could possibly get. The husband came up with an idea that, if she let him keep everything, he would give her half of his paycheck for the rest of his life. She quickly agreed, because his checks were huge and this also included any bonuses which were in the millions. As soon as the paperwork was finalized, he quit his job and started to work part-time at a sporting goods store. I can't remember which one. This story was told by another employee. They're not the actual guy that got divorced. Anyway, he still had all of his eats, so he would drive to work in a super expensive car, and one day the employee asked how he could possibly afford that car. The guy said he was set for life and didn't even need to work at all, but every Friday when he got his paycheck it made everything so worth it, knowing his ex-wife would only be getting about $150 per check. I remember that one. I think when the ex-wife tried to sue for more money, he just said the emotional toll of the divorce was too great and he just couldn't handle the stress of his old high-paying job anymore. Not a divorce lawyer, but I had an old neighbor that got a new car and then went back the next day and told them her husband loved her so much that he wanted the exact same thing in the exact same financing. She immediately hid that car at her mom's house and then filed for divorce. The affair came to light when they pulled the second car over and a strange man was driving it around. I'm confused. What's the point of getting a duplicate car? Not a divorce lawyer, but worked for one back in the 90s. A woman and her kids went on vacation and came back home to find that the soon-to-be ex-husband had broken into their house with his attorney, thrown a party, and microwaved the kid's kitten. Husband's attorney got disbarred, I believe, but that was about it. And microwaved the kid's kitten. What the actual duck is wrong with people? Child of traumatic divorce here. There's so many, and I mean so many things I could post on this thread about how ducking terrible my parents were to each other, but this takes the cake. My parents were separated in the process of divorcing and had split custody between my brother and I. We were 5 and 7 at the time. My dad didn't have his own place yet, so when it was his turn to be with us, he came back to our house, the one he purchased mind you, and my mom was supposed to leave. One weekend they were arguing over something, and it got so bad that my mom wouldn't leave and told my dad she would call the police, something she apparently did a lot to get her way, which after growing up with her I can attest she did this a lot unnecessarily to control us. So she left, called the police, told them my father was dangerous and had a gun. My dad was in the army and we had plenty guns, locked in a safe of course. Of course the police were just doing their job and took my mom at face value. It went so fast from my brother and I watching TV with my dad to the police knocking at our door, my dad opening the door and getting pepper sprayed without the cops saying anything, and then my dad locked the door and the cops couldn't bust it down, so they came around back and broke our sliding glass door in so they could arrest my dad in our front yard with all our neighbors watching. I didn't really understand what was happening at the time, but it was traumatizing for sure. Then my mom tried to get full custody of us in their actual divorce, and thank God the judge ruled for split custody. My whole childhood was just honestly BC. All they did was explain very deep and emotionally complex situations to very young children who just wanted their parents to love each other. But yeah, I've never quite forgiven my mom for that one. Another Redditor a few years ago gave a story about a couple getting divorced. I couldn't find the op, but here's a quote from a website that covered it. You/truant. Not me but a neighbor. The couple got divorced, and she got the house in the settlement. Only the house and the immediate house lot, not the surrounding land, that went to the husband. The first thing he did was sell all the lumber off the rest of the land. She went from living in a nice forest to living in a clear cut. He wasn't done yet. Once the trees were gone, he sold off the topsoil, then the gravel under that. By the time he was done, her house was on a hill overlooking a barren landscape reminiscent of the lunar surface. This was years ago, and the place is still hideous. Here's a Google Street View of the house. Imga. Why stop there if you've got minimal rights? Open a mine. Not a lawyer, but one of my drinking buddies just went through a nasty divorce. One of the things she pitted against him was $15k a year spent at a bar. Sounds bad, but 90% of the time they were both there, but he always paid with his card. But now he looks like an alcoholic. Honestly, that's when you call up the manager or even ask the judge to do it, so he can verify she was there with him. Deleted. My ex had me thrown in jail for domestic violence that never happened. That was a fun 23 hours. I'm an intellectual property attorney. I heard a story from an acquaintance. Basically, an extremely wealthy couple is getting a divorce, and it is getting nasty. Multiple millions of property to divide up, and it is very contentious. Eventually, the husband gets pissed. He offers the wife that she can have everything if he can have her beloved let goat. Eventually, she acquiesces and gets all of the property except the goat. He still has his lucrative job, so he'll be fine. He makes a video of himself killing, barbecuing, and eating the goat, and sends it to her. I don't know how true the story is, but it's the best I have heard. It'd be better if it turned out that either she never really liked that goat, or that she bought a second goat and had it prepped to look as much like the first one as possible, then handed that one over. A scapegoat. He owed her $500 as part of the settlement. He brought 2 buckets of unsorted coins, mostly pennies, to our office. She took the light bulbs out of every fixture when she moved out, then refused to give him right of first refusal if she wanted to get rid of their dog. She spent a year and a half systematically destroying their business and then expected him to pay her hundreds of thousands of dollars for her share of the now worthless business. $500 in small coins is a Rick move, but relatively harmless. I'll put it in manageable containers, take it to the bank, and deposit it. You get exercise, and the bank counts your money for you. Taking all the light bulbs is a Rick move, but also relatively harmless. I'll get to go buy more bulbs and a flashlight, and put bulbs back in. Deliberately destroying communal property is unconscionable. General post: if your ex-spouse wants your pet, and they intend harm to it, and it's not chipped, give the dog away to a friend. They can chip the animal and there you go. They have verified ownership. My ex did a good job of tricking me that we were having a nice, cordial, easy divorce until she asked me to sign a couple of quick, easy things. She was in a real hurry and got upset that I said I needed a couple of hours to read through them. Turns out she got someone to sneak in there that I was emotionally abusive, which was the opposite of the truth. I had to end up getting my own lawyer because of her shady chiz, and mine said she could have essentially taken anything and all of what she wanted if I would have signed that. Yeah, don't ever sign anything just real quick. Oh my, you watched until the end? That's fucking awesome, dude. Thanks for watching.